Dorothy Must Die, Chapter 23. A screeching sound woke me in the middle of the night. When I opened my eyes, still groggy, I saw it. A bat. It was zigzagging around my room, wings flapping, howling with a voice that was 10 times bigger than its body. I knew what it meant. It was a signal. It wanted me to follow it. When I got to the war room a few minutes later, everyone else was already there, dressed for battle, and clustered around Glamora's scrying pool. Melinda and Annabelle had grim looks on their faces. In other words, some things were the same as ever. "What is it?" I asked. "The lion's moving faster than we thought," Gert said. "It's time to go." Glamora pointed to the pool where the shadowy image of an enormous lion breaking through the door of a small thatched house appeared. It was too dark to really make him out, but he didn't look so cowardly to me. He looked mean. And hungry. Behind him I could see other silhouettes. The bumpy outlines of some kind of reptile and a furry blur that looked like it might have been some kind of enormous rodent. "The lion spent so long afraid of every creature in the forest. Now he commands them," Knox whispered. "What are those things?" "You name it. If it has claws and teeth and it drools, it probably answers to the lion." I felt myself shiver as my imagination filled in the blanks. "What are they doing?" I asked quietly, fighting back the irrational fear that he could hear me. "What they do best," Glamora replied, "going door to door. Some of the villagers he'll capture and bring back to Dorothy. The rest of them he'll kill. For fun. After he eats, of course." She trailed her fingers through the water, and the image disappeared in a swirl of red. "It's too late for this village. It's already lost. But he'll be on the next one soon, and if we act fast, we can stop him before he gets there." "Not to mention get to us," Knox said. "Exactly," Mombi interjected. "He's less than 100 miles from us. If he gets any closer, we run the risk of his senses all will be able to see past the magical barriers that keep us hidden here." She looked at me. "I hope what I saw yesterday wasn't a fluke, Amy. This isn't a test anymore." "Mombi," Knox said, cutting in. "Please, think about it. Amy should stay behind. We can't risk her on something like this. It's too dangerous." Mombi dismissed him with a wave of her gnarled hand. "We've already been through this, Knox. I wouldn't expect you, of all people, to let your feelings get in the way of what must be done. We need all the strength we can muster tonight." "If we can't count on Amy now, when will all the rest of us will be there? She won't be much good alone against Dorothy anyway," Melinda added, shooting a sidelong glance in my direction. I was annoyed. They were talking about me like I wasn't even there, and why was Knox trying to prevent me from going? Didn't he think I'd improved? "I'm going," I said coolly, all heads turning in my direction. "Melinda's right, and I'm a member of the Order now. I'm not just going to hide out here while everyone else fights." Knox's forehead creased in frustration, but he let it drop. It was settled. Mombi, Gert, and Glamora left the war room to make the final preparations. I was about to leave when Knox pulled me aside. "Here," he said, pushing something hard in my hand. I turned the object over in my palm. It was a knife, but it wasn't only a knife. I could tell it was special just by the way it felt. It was heavier than it looked, and it was almost vibrating with something that I now recognized immediately as magic. I didn't want to like it. I didn't want to like anything that Knox gave me, but I couldn't help it. The knife was too beautiful. It was nothing like the kitchen knife that Pete had given me. It had a glinting silver blade with mysterious symbols engraved in it. The hilt was smooth and white, and was intricately carved into a figure of a bird, with wings outstretched, ready to take flight. "I carved it by hand with a kaleidos bones," he said, looking down to avoid meeting my eyes. The blade's made from the claw. Gert spelled it, and Mombi sealed it. It's designed to channel your magic for you, to store it and make it easier to access. Not so different from Dorothy's magic shoes, really, except, hopefully, not total evil. I rubbed my fingers over Knox's handiwork. It must have taken hours. I know that he'd done it for the cause, so that I could be a better fighter, but it was still a gift, and it was still beautiful. "It will protect you," he said. "And there's another spell attached to it, too. Push the wings down." The wings didn't look like they would move, but when I pressed gingerly on them, they ceded easily to my touch and folded up neatly against the side of the bird's body. As they did, the knife sparkled in my hand and then evaporated into smoke that drifted off into the air. "Where did it go?" I asked. It's still with you, Knox said. Just not anywhere someone else can find it. Now picture it in your hand again. I looked down at my empty, open palm and imagined I was clutching the weapon. Its image entered my mind, and as it did, I was holding it again. Thank you, I said quietly. I wrapped my fingers gently around the hilt. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had given me anything, and this was something that Knox had made just for me. Something magic. I felt my spirit lift inside myself. The corners of my mouth threatened to turn upward, but I didn't want him to see how happy the present had made me. What kind of bird is this? I asked. I didn't look like any bird I've seen before. It's a magrill, a bird that's native to Gilgan country. It spends half its life as a beetle, and when it's an adult, it goes to sleep for a year and wakes up as this majestic creature. Kind of like a butterfly. Kind of like you, he said. I didn't have an answer to that. I didn't need one. At that moment, Mombi appeared before us. He looked down at the knife and up at me and then at Knox. It's time to go, she said. We all gathered a few minutes later in the training room. Me, Knox, Gert, and Mombi, and held hands. Glamora would be staying behind, along with Melindra and Annabelle. Melindra complained about being left behind. She wasn't the type to want to miss out on any of the action. But she seemed placated when Mombi reminded her that it was important that our most skilled fighter guard the headquarters in case it was a trap. Melindra didn't look too happy about it, but she knew better than to argue with Mombi. I felt myself envying her. Now that it was time to go, I suddenly wondered if I should have been so eager to fight. But it was too late to think about that. In the training area, we all stood in a circle, all of us chanting at once as we worked together to cast a spell that would take us to the village. Glamora took a step back, still chanting, and stepped out of the circle, followed by Annabelle and Melindra. We all joined hands. Knox looked over at me. Hold on, he warned me with a sly, nervous grin. He squeezed tight. I felt an invisible force start to lift me, and it yanked me upward like a bullet, and we shot straight up. I screamed and closed my eyes, knowing I was about to be smushed like a bug against the roof of the cave. Instead, I felt wind in my face. I opened my eyes and found that my body was horizontal. My arms strained to their limbs as I held on to Knox. Everyone else still had their eyes closed. Their mouths formed the same chant over and over and over, and we were all fanned out like skydivers in formation, the mountain below us hurtling out of sight. We were flying. It was the most incredible feeling I've ever had. The sensation of free-falling made me giddy and lightheaded, like I was a balloon and my insides were helium. I laughed, almost forgetting that I, Salvation Amy, was on my way to battle the not-so-cowardly lion and his army of monsters. How could my stomach tie itself into knots about what was coming when I was busy tumbling into the sky? It never gets old, Knox said, opening his eyes, in case you were wondering. His normally spiky hair was flattened against his head by the wind, but for some reason his voice came out normal, like we were still standing right next to each other in the training room. You could have warned me, I said. I thought we were going to teleport. It takes too much energy to teleport this many people, he said. By the time we got there, we'd all be ready to pass out from exhaustion. This is more efficient. Plus, it's fun. Won't they see us coming? Nope, Knox said. We're traveling in the space between space. They can't see us if we're not really here. It's how we pass through the mountain. Oh, I said, pretending I knew what he was talking about. I'll explain later, he said. Should we still be chanting? I asked nervously, seeing that both Mombi and Gert still had their eyes squeezed shut. Nah, he said. The takeoff is the hard part. Now that we're on our way, it only takes Gert to keep us in the air. What's Mombi doing then? I asked. Knox wiggled his eyebrows and lowered his voice to a contemptuous stage whisper. Mombi's afraid of heights, he said. She's not casting a spell, she's saying her prayers. Who exactly do wicked witches pray to? Knox laughed. Who knows? She's just trying to stay distracted so she doesn't piss herself before we land. Our ascent had slowed down by now, and we floated easily through the air, a mist of lavender clouds hovering just inches above our heads. In the distance, the sun was rising over the deadly desert. Instead of looking down, I looked at Knox as he took in the landscape. Seeing him like this, away from the caves, away from the cause, I could almost see the boy he could have been. The boy he would have been if Dorothy had never came back. He looked happy. He looked beautiful. Then he turned dark again. "Almost here," he said. I followed his gaze and saw thick, black smoke rising from a forested area at the foot of a mountain range curling into the sky. "Get ready," Gert said, not opening her eyes. "We're coming in for a landing." The knot in my stomach tied itself right back up as our velocity reversed itself and we hurtled for the ground, picking up speed. But her warning was unnecessary. We landed like feathers in a field on the outskirts of what must have been Pumperdink. It was on fire. Its small, dome-shaped houses consumed with flames as panicked townspeople raced in every direction. The smell filled my nostrils and stayed there, churning. It was disgusting. A horrible combination of smoke and blood and burning flesh and other things, I'm sure, that I didn't even want to know about. As I looked around, unsure what to do next, I saw something moving above me. Monkeys. They were weaving through the burning sky. The almost human-like way in which they swooped and dove into the chaos made me shiver. "Mommy and I will take down the beasts left in this village and save as many of the children as we can," Gert said, turning back to me and Knox. "Amy, you go with Knox and find the lion. Send a summoning spell when you've got him in your sights. Don't try to defeat him yourselves. He's too powerful for either of you to take on without us." Knox nodded, and Mombi and Gert disappeared.